Hi, welcome into the studio and to this Kingfisher in Pastels demonstration. Now I'm working on light grey pastel matte paper, and I've chosen light grey because I want to make all the colours stay nice and vibrant. So it's not white, although it is quite white. It's not a pure white, it's more of an off-white, so we can still see white highlights. If I put a white pastel pencil on this, you'd really be able to see the difference. I've transferred as per normal my image to the pastel matte paper, and what you're seeing is just an initial blocking in. So while you're observing that, I'll talk a bit about what else you're seeing on the screen. On the left, I've selected some of those greeny and bluey kind of tones. On the right, almost out of shot, there's the oranges for the bird's chest area, and you can see lots of different brands of pencils in there as well. Now those are colours that I've collected over the last couple of years that I've been doing pastels. So I've got Carbothello in there, Pitt in there, Gioconda. So you're just going to use the selection and the collection that you've actually got yourself. As I said, I've built those up over time, but even then I haven't got exact colour matches, so you'll see me layering one colour over another to try and get close to what you're seeing in the reference at the top of the screen. Now with pastels, we normally work pretty much from mid-tone to light, or dark to light, because we can overlay so easily. Now with this Kingfisher, as you can see on that little piece of paper I'm using, I've done lots of little tests on there, and you can even see a test towards the top where I've tried to work out how to do this top of the head, where we've got lots of that vibrant blue and light colours, and then those dark stripy marks on there as well. And what I found by doing those tests is, for me personally, the best way is to get the light vibrant tones down first on that part of the head, as I'm doing now, and then overlay those dark stripes, because it's easier to darken a light colour than to put a dark underlayer and try and get a vibrant light colour to sit on top of it. We're always going to get some form of contamination any way we go, because there's going to be pastel underneath. But by putting the lighter tones on first, as I said, as I'm doing now, I can overlay those darker ones with the least amount of contamination. And because I don't need very dark pure blacks for those feather markings or stripy markings, that'll work just fine. If I had to have a very dark, like I say, a pure black in any of those areas, I'd want to leave that area undrawn or without any contaminating pastel underneath. And you'll see me do things like that on the beak, where I just go straight in with the darks. But for this, I'm going to build those darker tones up on top. Now this drawing took me just over about 2 hours, so a lot of it will be in real time on this video, or only slightly sped up. So you're going to see a lot of my pencil work. Now, I started off with probably about 20 colours, but when I got to the end of the drawing, I'd gone back into my sets looking for little fine nuances of colour, so I ended up probably with about 30 colours, even on a subject such as this. So it is a case of look at what you've got in your own sets. You could very easily block in with pan pastels, as I show in lots of my videos, or pastel sticks for the underlayers. But I wanted to keep this nice and simple, so I'm using pretty much all just pastel pencils, and for the background I just put that in with some pastel stick. So this beginning stage is kind of the underdrawing, as I normally do, finding out where colours are going to go. Just generally, colours don't need to be exact yet. This really is just blocking in, so I block in all the shades of orange, where the eye is going to go. But I haven't put the background in yet, because I don't want any pastel contaminating it, because it's quite a flat background. Now I'm blending and pushing a lot of these early layers in with a stump. So that's pushing that pastel into the tooth or the grain of the paper, giving me a smoother appearance. Going in the direction that the feathers are laying, pretty much. And that's keeping all that nice and soft. I don't want all hard edges here. And it's also important, by pushing in, it'll allow me to reserve and keep enough tooth of the paper so that I can put my details on top in the latter stages. Now sometimes I put my pencil up to the reference just to check that the colour is quite accurate. And that's also once again why I've got that small piece of pastel matte paper top right hand corner, so I can, especially along the edge of that, you can see those marks where I've put the pencil and then held it right up to the reference to see how close it can be. And that's really important. Lots of people just go for it and go in and find the colours are all wrong, and then they just get carried away with that and never correct them. Check out on pieces of the paper to see how accurate you are by holding it up to the reference as close as you can, right next to the area if possible. So all I'm going to do now is just carry on putting in the general colours in the correct places. As I said, this is the underlayer. But I am drawing a bit more direct with this subject. When you see some of my bigger subjects, then you'll see me blocking in large areas, but this is really small, very, very detailed. So I'm doing it more in a kind of the way I would do coloured pencils. I'm refining each area a lot more than I normally would, because I don't want lots of smudgy pastels everywhere. It's only a small subject, so I'm keeping things small by using just the pencils. But even so, I will be darkening areas and lightening areas a bit more towards those latter stages. Now I like to get something light in quite earlier on, so that's the top of the head. I like to get something dark in, so I work on the eye. And as you know, if you've seen other videos, that helps me then judge the light and darks, the tones of all the other elements in the drawing to allow me to get them more accurate. An important part with this drawing is keeping the vibrancy of the colours. So I want to make sure that I can really get those punchy oranges on the chest and those blues on the head. Okay, time to work on the eye. Very, very simple for this subject. Mainly just flat black, especially on this bottom section. Go a bit lighter then on the top, and then that bright highlight, the reflection of the sun in the eye with just a white dot to bring it to life. This pencil is a Pitt pastel pencil, one of my favourite brands. They're quite hard. The Carbothello and the Pitt are fairly hard pencils, so they sharpen really nice to a point, but they're not so hard that they're brittle. So if you're just starting out and you're wondering which pencils to get first in the pastel range, that's what I would look at as a starting set: Carbothello and Pitt pastel pencils. Now the ones you see on the right hand side, the orange ones, they are Gioconda. They're a much softer pencil, but they're more punchy and vibrant, and they're going to be just right for the orange area of the chest. Softer pastels are generally a bit more vibrant, and as I said, a bit more of a punchy colour. So there's that lighter area on the eye, so it's a bit of a grey. Bit darker on this section. As I said, very, very simple eye. You can't get much more easy than this. So it's a bit lighter on that top, like in the reference photo, and in fact I think I'll overlay that with a bit of blue, and that just that usually enlivens the eye a bit more. It's giving us the impression of the blue sky, a sunny day actually above, reflecting in the eye. And then when I get just a suggestion of that sun in at the moment, that'll bring it to life. I'll probably revisit this, refine everything towards the end, but as I said, it's very, very simple eye, not detailed at all, not complicated. Now in this orange section, once again, I'm keeping everything light, bright, vibrant. It's easier to dull down and subdue a vibrant colour than have one that's too subdued underneath and try to make it vibrant on top. So that's why I'm going towards the side of keeping things overly punchy at the moment, overly vibrant, so that, as I said, I can subdue those areas that require it later on. Because with wildlife, lots of the times, especially with furry animals, you're working with more subdued colours. So you haven't got very punchy things, but when you start looking at birds and butterflies and flowers, then it's the other way round. Then you've got very vibrant, punchy subjects sometimes, and it's easy to lose the vibrancy, to lose the lightness, and struggle to get it back. So that's a top tip for when you're doing punchy subjects. Get the punchy colours in. You'll see when I work on the head why I did it that way, rather than going dark and trying to overlay light. Obviously pastel will overlay lighter over darks. That's the main benefit of them. But everything has got a limit. And something like a Kingfisher, they really don't get much more punchy than this. So this is an extreme example. Now this is a muted purple colour. The other pencil I just put down was kind of a muted blue. I'm starting to get some of the darker elements. That's giving me that shape and the distinction between the blue and the orange areas. And everything's still looking a bit grainy at the moment on the head. I've got to do a lot more layering. It'll look smoother then as I start filling the tooth of the paper up more. Okay, time to work on this vibrant orange area on the chest. Blocking in the basic colours, no details yet. It's not a great deal of detail going to go on the chest area anyway. But just getting the major colours in, making sure I'm going around areas such as that blue, blue-green. Don't want to go contaminating by putting a lot of this orange under there. I'm trying to keep the colours quite separate. Now I could have used sticks for this, or softer pastels. They would have obviously filled these areas up more cost effectively, because I'm using quite a bit of pastel pencil blocking in. So that's where I would normally use the pastel sticks. But if all you've got is pencils, and as I say, I'm trying to keep this demonstration nice and simple, there's no reason why you can't use pencils for the whole thing. It's just they weigh down quite quickly, especially if you're using one colour, or primarily one colour for a large area, as I've just done. Now clean finger for blending. It's easy if you've started blending perhaps in the blue area to forget to wipe your fingers in a microfiber cloth, and then all of a sudden you've contaminated that area. This left hand section, as we're looking at it, very, very dark purpley colour. Surprising how dark it is. Once again, I'd advise you to take a close look at your reference photo on whatever subject you're doing. So if you're doing a kingfisher, a different one, then it's going to have different subtleties to the colours. So you're going to be needing different coloured pastels. But when you look at a dark area such as this, it can be very confusing to the eye. You may well go too light. So use those scrap pieces of paper to try the colours out, put them up against the reference as I'm doing there, just to judge it, and that will help you a great deal. So spend your time picking out and selecting and trying the different colours. Very important. So that's all the main colours blocked in on the chest area. And then I can check my fingers clean and just blend these all together. And those lighter areas that you can see on the chest, they'll overlay, no problem at all. I just wanted to get just a general form, just the main masses of colours. I can see I need to come across a bit more with this as well, but all that refinement, no problem. I can do all that later on as well. And as I said, I haven't put the background in yet because I wanted to keep it as clean as possible, but at some stage there'll come a time where you've got to put the background in to help judge the colours of the subject more also. Okay, let's start on the beak. I've sharpened up my pit pastel, resting on my glassine paper so I'm not smudging the body. It's a bit tricky because there's a lot of beak on this bird, so that's a lot of dark pastel, and then I've got that light background. So if I put the background in first, when I'm getting this dark in place, invariably there's going to be dark pastel dust moving around, blowing around, and that will then be going over the background. So that would mean I'm going to have to keep touching up the background. Alternatively, by doing it this way, I'm preserving the background a bit, but usually on a subject you want to get the background in so that you can overlay the area, so that I could overlay the edge of the beak slightly over the background so that I'm not getting a butted up against each other cut out appearance to it. So what I'm going to do is put the beak in, but I'm saving that little edge, not going quite up to the edge. Then I'll put the background in, then I can come and finalize the shape of the beak. So that's basically why I'm working in this order. Lots of little colour variances, even in the beak. It's not just like black or grey. Lots of little bits of bounced light, bits of the orange from the chest bouncing up into the bottom part of the beak just subtly. So I'm being mindful to look at those little colour variances as well. You'll see me layer those on top later. And it's easy with pastel to be able to put in, say, a grey now, and if I want to warm it up I can glaze a pinky colour on top just by using the pencil very, very finely, sometimes on its side. And then blending it in, I'm using a hard stump there, so that's a paper stump. It's got a hard edge or tip to it, and that means it's not smudging the pastel a lot. It's actually just pushing it into the surface, making it all look a bit more smooth. So it's getting rid of that grainy tooth of the paper. But it's not my soft stump, so Derwent and other companies do some soft rice paper stumps, and they really blend out. I wanted more control, so I'm using one of these harder paper stumps. You can see how that's looking a lot smoother now I've done that. It's got a dark top edge to it as well. As I say, I'm not going right to the very edge of it just yet. I'm getting that in place, then I'll put the background in. As I said, then I can start refining the shape and the colours a bit more. So putting in the background, pretty simple task. I'm using a grey, a warmish grey pastel stick. There's lots and lots of different companies out there that make them. You could do it with pencils if you want, but as you can imagine, it weighs pencils down very quickly if you're using them to block in areas such as this. And I'm just going to put in this main colour over everywhere. Then I can adjust it a bit if I want to. Might just keep it a bit plain. The main subject is obviously all those details in the Kingfisher, so I don't want a busy background that's going to compete against that. You can see I'm leaving a tiny little line there because I'll blend that in with my fingers up to the edge and even slightly over the edge of the subject, so I haven't got that sharp edge where one butts up against another. I want it quite soft, and then I'll work on refining that edge with my pencils. So you can see it has a very quick background to go in. I'm turning the pastel stick every now and again just so that I'm not getting a really flat edge on it. Couple of little colour variances going in, and then I'll start blending it all in smoothly with my fingers. Now you can also use a pencil on the side. This is that glazing technique I mentioned, just to add a bit of colour variance here and there. I'm not exactly matching what I'm seeing on the reference. Doesn't make too much difference in this subject. I'm just glazing a little bit of colour on there, just give a bit of interest before I blend it all over. So that's basically what I would class as the end of stage 1. That's the blocking in. No real refinement on there. Everything has got its place. I've got all the major elements in. Now I'm starting what I'd call really stage 2, where I'm refining things, making little adjustments with colours, as you can see now, and tones, lightness and darkness. I'm really starting to detail the area. So getting those little adjustments in, going in that feather direction. Really critical to have that glassine paper under my hand now, because I'm working flat, so you can see the techniques much more easily on the video. But if you're working upright, if I was working upright, actually I probably would have put the background in earlier on, because pastel will be dropping down on the bird. So keep that in mind if you're working completely upright. You may want to try that out for yourself. You can see I'm just generally punching up that bluey green colour before I start to add the darker elements on top. Okay, onto those stripes. Got my pit pencil. It's nice and sharp. I want a sharp edge so I can get these details on. You can see how I'm going around and away from the green, leaving the green in place, not covering all of it up. So I'm working negatively here, around the highlights, around the lighter areas. Now I'm using that pit. As I said, it's a harder pencil, so I can get a nice sharp edge without it crumbling away. If you're using something like the expensive Caran d'Ache pastels, they're soft. You're really not going to be able to sharpen them up like this. If you're using the Gioconda, once again, they're soft. You're not going to get that sharp edge. You need to be using something like a pit or the Carbothello to be able to get it this sharp. Now perhaps you think, what about using just a standard coloured pencil? Well, you can do that, but it's not got the same look as a pastel. It'll be shiny. Whereas pastel, when I'm laying down the pastel, it's got a uniform, completely matte surface to it. So that's something else to keep in mind. I do use coloured pencils, sometimes for very small areas where I want it perfectly sharp. You see me sometimes do a few whiskers on subjects when I want a really sharp white element. But virtually all of my drawings will be done with just pastel pencils. So you can see I'm going slowly, carefully. Don't want to make any mistakes. I don't have to, and I'm not following exactly the reference photo on this. I'm just after that general shape and form, so my strokes are going in the same direction roughly as the reference, but I'm not worried about duplicating all of these little feather patterns. I'm not after trying to get an exact photographic representation. I want a representation of a kingfisher bird rather than an exact copy of a photograph. So I'm going to carry on now. It's going to take me a little while. Sometimes I'll use lighter pressure to get a lighter stroke, a lighter lay down of pastel. Sometimes I'll push a bit harder. And as I'm coming to the right hand side, I'll start to switch over to a slightly lighter pencil and a bluer pencil. Okay, so I think that's turned out quite well. You can see I'm going back in with some of these punchy markings, these lighter areas, but I'm quite happy with how that's turned out so far. I'm glad I did that test piece, even though it was just little postage stamp size, to work out the way I was going to do the head with those dark markings, because if I put that in dark first, as you can see here, I would never have got back to that really punchy light area. So I'm just going to carry on refining this part of the head. Here you can see I'm going to move a pure white, but because it's picking up some of the pastel that's already down, it's not depositing a pure white, but it's lightening it just as I want it to. Nice sharp pencil again. And what you'll find with the softer pencils is that the whites are even softer again. So if you're using something like the Caran d'Ache or the Gioconda and you're trying to do things like whiskers, you're going to struggle because they are so soft, they weigh down very quickly and deposit a lot of white. But they've got their place. So where I've got that white strip towards the rear, upper rear of the head, you can see that pure white looking area. I'll use those softer pastels for that, to deposit a lot of pastel deliberately and to make it really punchy and white. Just subduing a few of these areas, so light grey, going over those darker elements. So once again, that's the beauty of pastel, we can go light over dark and dark over light. You can see how I use that exact same technique to do that section under the eye, the greeny blue section under the eye, exactly the same thing. Now I'm just going to refine this chest area a bit. Got to alter the shape where the background's coming over slightly. Going to keep the edge not as sharp, I don't think, as in the reference photo, because when you've got an edge that's slightly blurry, it makes the subject look more rounded rather than cut out. So all I'm going to do in this section, just work on refining this a bit more, get the shape a bit better. Nothing complicated in there at all. Not a lot of detail on the chest area, so just some lighter yellows and lighter oranges, just giving the indication of some of these feathers rather than it being one block of colour. You can see I do a lot less blending with my fingers in the latter stages. I don't want to be smudging areas then, so I do a lot of blending in the first layer or so, and then very little as the refinement starts to build up. I use the pencils much more directly. So just looking at refinement now, as it's getting more finished, I'm looking at more and more subtle and slight differences and making those adjustments. So now I've got my really vibrant, bright coloured pencil, and that's going to make all these colours zing, bring a lot more life to it, and that's what the Kingfisher is going to be about. So I need to make sure that I can use this sharp pencil. I'm pushing quite firmly to deposit quite a lot of pencil on there, and you'll see how the colours will really start to sing a lot more. Now as I work along the back, I'm refining and finding the shape of the feathers, the main shapes of the feathers, and I'm going to build up the details just as I did on the head, just as I did on the area underneath the eye. As I say, I'm not looking for a perfect representation, and I'm actually going to, I think, not put in quite as much detail as in the reference on this section, just so that really stamps the head as centre of interest. So I'm just going to build this area up in exactly the same way. Now in this section I'm dragging this pink over the top of the green. Now what I'm doing when my pencil leaves the screen is I'm touching the end or wiping it on a microfiber cloth, because each time I'm going over the very dark I'm picking up some of that on the tip of the pencil, and if I put that back into the orange it'll just contaminate and I'll have a dark mark in there. So that's what I'm doing. I'm dragging out, touching it each time that I've gone over a dark area. I'm just giving it a quick wipe on the microfiber cloth. And that's good for when you're doing things like whiskers as well. So if you don't want contamination from a dark area, you can just see the cloth there, just going over, pushing quite hard, and building that up. As those little feathers are coming over that darker area. So just bits of refinement now to finish off the drawing. Putting some of these lighter strokes over the chest. You can see they overlay very well, very easily. Lots of people ask me about fixatives. Do I use a fixative at the end to preserve it and to protect the drawing? I don't, especially if the subjects are very vibrant, such as this, very contrasty, because all of the fixatives alter the colour to some degree, and some are so bad they would without a doubt just ruin it and it wouldn't look anything like this at all. So all I basically do is protect it. You'll see on my YouTube channel or my Patreon channel I show I protect my pastels and pack them up, and then when they go to a client then they get framed. So it's just double mount board and glass on the front, and that's perfectly preserved. Nothing else needs to be done. A few more final touches. Putting some purple underneath here. It's a bit too vibrant, but I can subdue that then with some grey and white on top. So sometimes you've got to do that to get a colour that you want. And that's going to add to the shadow appearance underneath here that goes down onto the chest. And now it's almost completely finished, so I'm looking at everything as a whole. I'm going to start to darken areas and put in the final highlights to really punch that up right at the end to add to the contrast. A few more details on the beak as well. Needs to go a bit lighter. Need to refine that top edge. So these are all those final things that, you know, it's easier to see once the drawing is almost done. It's easier to see the little areas that need a bit of colour perhaps to them, that needs to be lighter or darker. That's why I like to, I always work in layers rather than try and finish one area at a time before moving on to the next. I find it's much easier building up layers, just as I would do with my oil paint ends, exactly the same technique. Obviously with oils we've got even more ability to layer opaque over an underlayer, so you can keep doing that pretty much forever, whereas with pastels we've got the tooth of the paper that's going to limit us. But that's why I use pastel mat, because it's the best paper I've found so far. If you're trying to do this on something like ombre paper or ingress paper, this is not going to work. You're not going to be able to do it to this level with these techniques. It just doesn't layer on top of that paper like this paper. You'd have to use a completely different technique to do it. So to do something like this, is pastel mat or another sanded paper or pastel card. We've got to have a tooth to the paper. It's got to be a slight roughness so they will take the layers. Okay, so this is just the final bit of detailing. I could keep going and going with it, but I think it's pretty accurate. I think I've shown you the techniques to draw something detailed like this, and especially how to achieve them with a punchy and light and vibrant subject. As I said, it doesn't get more punchy and vibrant than a kingfisher in a strongly lit photograph. So I'm quite happy with the way those... The main challenge with this was the head, obviously, with the banding marks of the feathers. So I'm happy with the way that's turned out. If I did another subject like this, that's the way I'd attack it. If I'd gone the other way around and gone dark first and then tried to get those lights on top, I don't think I would have got anywhere near the vibrancy in those blue greens at all. So last couple of marks going on, I think I'll leave it there. Hope you've enjoyed this one. It's another very different subject. Something I wanted to concentrate on just to show how I tackled that vibrancy. Love to see the work that you create as well. And don't forget, lots and lots of other videos and subjects on my Patreon channel. See you all again real soon.